when the talking is done and the Dogs take the field on Saturday. I know a lot of folks feel that way. Now, listen, I have a little bit of a special place in my heart for talking because I talk for a living, but there is kind of that big game vibe around here where there's so much talking that gets done that it's almost everything that can be said has been said. Now it's time just to kind of, tape up, buckle up, and play the game. I do get that, Philip. Bob Zamblin joins the throngs of those who expect a convincing win. Bob says the Dogs are going to dominate on Saturday. Steve Highland says, this ain't my granddad's Dogs, hashtag JD to NYC. That's good stuff. Jesse S. says, comparing game scores doesn't work well as a predictor of outcome. Bama is talented. It'll be close. I agree with you, Jesse, to a point. First of all, your overall takeaway that the game's going to be close, I definitely agree with you on that. I just said that. But as far as like the comparative score thing goes, I know it's a joke on the internet about the way they call it transitive property, where this team beat that team and that team beat this team, so therefore this team is better than that team. I realize that joke's out there a pretty good bit, but I would not join you in saying that there is no value in comparative scores, especially when you have multiple common opponents. And Georgia and Alabama have, 4 common opponents? Tennessee, Auburn, Arkansas, Florida. It's 4 common opponents, right? And in 3 of those 4 games, Georgia dominated the common opponent far more than Alabama did. And the Tennessee game was kind of a wash for both sides, I guess. But I do take that to mean something. Now, I don't take it to mean so much to say, well, that means that Georgia's not even going to be close against Alabama. I probably won't let that be the coup de grace for my opinion, but I do take something out of the fact that Georgia has kind of dominated teams that Alabama has played closely. J-Bob gives you the beat Bama. Boy, I appreciate y'all doing that. We're trying to get that going. Our friends over at the UGA official account, they gave us the beat Alabama, going with the more acceptable name, on social media earlier this week, and y'all are keeping that alive. Love to see that. Mark Woodmansee says, AWS statistical data, which I work with all day, every day, bears out a minimum 15-point victory for the Dogs. So there you go. Jan Armistead says, I want a beat down. Well, Jan, I'm right there with you on that. Steve Highland said, Reese Davis said, 40 years of frustration will be unleashed. Boy, that's fun to think about. Brian Whitehead checking in to say, typically Bama is playing its best ball by this time of year. Are they doing that this year? Yeah, there is that moment, Steve, or I should say Brian, where I do expect Alabama to kind of flip that switch and kind of be Alabama and play the way we've come to expect them to play. But that has not really happened this year. And it doesn't mean that it can't happen on Saturday. I'm going to be on guard for that a little bit. That, first of all, I do expect Alabama to play better this week than it played last week because most college teams do play differently week to week. So I expect a little better performance from Alabama than maybe we got a week ago. But the one thing that just hasn't happened yet is Alabama oftentimes has that sleepwalk performance in September, and by October, they usually really figure it out to a high level. But this team this year is just kind of really not doing that right now. Mike Q predicts 27-17. That would certainly be a fun score. Allison Scally says, I just feel like we're going to win big. Boy, y'all, I'm going to be very happy if that's the case. Mike Q also talking about seeing more of Xavier Truss. Like one of the things that's been compared to is, the way in which Ben Cleveland emerged for Georgia in 2017. That maybe this is Truss's time to do something similar. That's been kind of compared before. Georgiana Olive says, pack your trunks, you pachyderms. The Dogs are taking over. It's time for you to move on. Love that, Georgianne. Jermaine King checks in to say 34-17. He says, Jordan Davis will score a touchdown for another Heisman moment. Hashtag JD to NYC. If that's what goes down, if Davis gets another touchdown on Saturday, whether it be a scoop and score or something like that, I believe that might blow the roof off Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Jesse S. says, I didn't say there was no value in comparative scores, just said it doesn't work well as a predictor. Certainly, it's only a portion of the predictive data for sure. Mark Woodmansee, very confident right now. Brian Whitehead says, I think that Bama gets a touchdown first drive, similar to what Tennessee did. After that, Georgia defense locks it down. 38-13, Dogs on top. Mark Morris also says, I'm confident it's possible going into the game Saturday, but I'd be happy for a 1-point win. Yeah, you and me both on that. Bob Zamblin says, if we reasonably contain Will Anderson, our offense will be plenty good for the Dogs to win. And that's a big issue. We've talked about that a lot. Will Anderson is a terrific player, dominant force there. And you do have to be very well aware let me try that again. We'll edit all this out later on. We don't really edit things out. But the point is, you have to be very well aware of where Anderson is at all times. You do. Tom says, voted for JD today at promo.espn.com. Yeah, I hate to give them so much love, but I do want to see Davis doing well in the voting. We'll show you this as part of our golden shoe later on, that Davis right now is doing okay in the votes, but it'd be nice to get him some more votes, so we'll do some more of that here in a little bit. Right now, Kenny Pickett, the Pitt quarterback, is getting tons of votes. Steve Highland says that Darnell's blocking's been off the charts lately. Look out, Will Anderson. I love to think about that. Rob says running the ball will be the key. Time of possession, keep it away from Bama. That might be true. RX Dog says Ty was going to hear all week about the underdog status and will come out angry. Dogs will need to weather an early storm. RX, I think you're probably right about that, that certainly Alabama's going to try to use that as a form of motivation. But for whatever reason, that kind of thing just hasn't really quite clicked with Alabama yet this year. Maybe that happens on Saturday, but it hasn't quite clicked as of yet. We're going to talk today about some of those big keys to victory for Georgia. We'll deal with the Dan Lanning rumor that's out there. We'll have our buddy Mike Griffith stopping by. We'll talk about all of the various things that can happen because of the way in which the top 25 may shake out. The college football playoff announcement might shake out coming up on Sunday, which, by the way, we're going to be live for on the DawgNation video channels, celebrating what we certainly hope is an appearance for the Dogs in the college football playoff for just the second time. So we'll do that with you on Sunday. That is going to be fun. So it's a big show for us. We're getting ready for tomorrow at Marlowe's Tavern in Brookhaven. Chase for the championship event there. Dogs on the pursuit here right now. So what do you say we talk more about it? Good bit of Georgia stuff off the top. Simple way in which Georgia can take a big step towards winning this SEC championship on Saturday. That sounds like a pretty good place for me to begin this one today. So glad to have you with us as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
One of the things I mentioned on yesterday's show is a long-term trend for Alabama that does mean something to me. You can go back to the 2018 national championship game against Clemson. Alabama was, for the most part, blown out. 2017 game against Auburn, Alabama lost pretty convincingly by double-digit points on the road there at Jordan-Hare Stadium. But for the most part, other than that, for many, many years, when Alabama has lost, it has, for the most part, been pretty close. This year to Texas A&M, about a field goal. 2020 didn't lose to anyone. 2019, close loss at the end of the season to Auburn. Close loss to the eventual national champion LSU. Go back to 2016. All throughout these years, when Alabama's losing games, for the most part, with the exception of the two that I mentioned, for many, many years, when they've lost, it has for the most part been a close loss. That is a long-term trend that means something to me. So if it's possible to feel this way, the way that I feel about Saturday's game is I feel justifiably pretty confident that Georgia will win. There's a lot of reasons to argue for UGA winning this game. I think most Georgia fans feel that way. There are plenty of people who are neutral observers, just want to see a good football game, but plenty of those who also think that Georgia's going to win. But the one thing I cannot say, some Georgia fans seem to want to, and maybe they'll end up being right about this, but the one thing I can't join them on is not only will Georgia win, it's going to win convincingly. I expect Georgia to win, but I expect it to be a hard-fought 60-minute type of game where Georgia has to play all four quarters to get that done. That's just kind of what the story's been when Alabama's lost games in the past. However, I want to talk about something different here for a moment. Because as much as there is that long-term trend of Bama, when it loses, it's playing close, there is also a short-term trend this year that is equally worthy of attention. That we have kind of said now over and over again, that is there ever going to be that moment where Alabama kind of flips the switch and becomes Alabama? This truly dominant team, the likes of which that most of the country can only be envious of. Now, Bama unquestionably has still been one of the best teams in the country here this season, and there's a chance even if they lose on Saturday, they still make the college football playoff. We'll talk more about that before the show is done today. But this notion of Bama being Bama, boy, it just seems like this year Alabama never quite took that final step towards actually being that version of itself. And If your eyes kind of suggest that's true, let me give you a number that kind of verifies that even more. There's a guy named Brad Edwards. He used to work for ESPN. Now he doesn't, but I still follow him on Twitter. Kind of a college football data type guy. He's, I think, an Alabama grad too, I think anyway. But the point is, he put this out there about Alabama, which I thought was kind of interesting and that was worthy of us seeing here for a moment. So if you're watching on video, let me show you this on the screen. And if you're obviously listening radio and podcasts, I'll read this to you. Now, Brad Edwards says, you can question whether Alabama fans should be bothered by close wins. But here's the reason why they are. Bama SEC regular season wins by 7 points or fewer. He says in 2015, there was just one. In 2016, there was just one. 2017, once again, there was just one. 2018, 2019, 2020, there weren't any. But in 2021, there have been 4 wins for Alabama in SEC play by a touchdown or less. That is the statistical evidence that you need to say that Alabama this season has not quite been what we've used to seeing it be in the past. Because the Alabama that we're used to seeing in the past is, for the most part, handling its SEC games with ease. Great teams don't prove themselves by what they do in close games. Great teams prove themselves by avoiding those close games. And for the most part, over the course of years, Alabama has simply avoided those close games, but not this year. And as it turns out, a lot of those close games for Alabama have come against opponents that Georgia has also played. Florida, Georgia blew out the Gators. Alabama played it right down to the wire. Arkansas, a couple of weeks ago. That's another game that kind of went down to the wire, but Georgia beat Arkansas 37-0. The Auburn game, Alabama had to go into multiple overtimes to win that game, but that's a game that Georgia won with ease in the same venue, Jordan-Hare Stadium, a little earlier in the season. That Alabama has just played more more close SEC games this season than we're kind of used to seeing them before. It's not really been that version of Alabama. But yet, as I said a moment ago, even with that said, there is still the expectation for me that the game is going to be close, because while Alabama may have won games in a closer fashion than it has more often this season, as I mentioned a moment ago, over the course of years when Alabama has lost games, those have had a tendency to be a little close too. Which is where you kind of get back to the history for Georgia against Alabama. And by now you know that. I don't need to spend a whole lot of time bringing this up, but we got to consider this going into Saturday's game. Georgia has had the lead at halftime in each of the last 3 times it's played Alabama. Last year, Jordan-Hare Stadium, 2018 SEC Championship game, 2017 National Championship game. Now, I'm going to throw last year's game out because that's just a little bit different type of thing all the way around. But I was on the radio yesterday in Atlanta on 92.9 The Game, and they asked me, and it's a fair question. It's the kind of question that should be asked right now. What can Georgia do differently this time to make sure that result doesn't occur again? That if we look at the preponderance of data here, Bama playing some close games this year, but also over the course of years losing. When they lose, the games have been close. If we expect this to be the kind of 4-quarter game where every play matters, everything's a big deal, then what can Georgia do this time in 2021 to make sure that this time isn't like last time? What needs to happen for that to be the case? And I think the answer to this is actually really pretty simple. And the good news is I need things to be simple. I'm not always the smartest guy in the world, so when things can be simple, it just makes it easier to understand. And I do like it when football, which is by its nature 22 guys in the field, complicated schemes, when it can be simplified, I just think it's better for all of us. To me, here's the simple statement. Go back and look at what got Georgia in trouble SEC championship game in 2017. No points scored in the fourth quarter. Go back and look at what happened last year in Tuscaloosa. Once again, no points scored in the fourth quarter there. 2018 SEC title game. Am I right to say that Georgia didn't score in the second half at all? Is my memory serving me correct on that? That Georgia got points early and did so to build a lead against Alabama, but it had a hard time maintaining that offensive momentum through the full game, which ultimately I think played a big part in what allowed Alabama to get come-from-behind victories in all 3 of those games. So let me give you a simple statement, which I think can go a long way towards ensuring victory for Georgia on Saturday. Not guaranteeing victory because I can't provide that for you. But here's one thing I think it can ensure victory for Georgia, take a step towards making a victory more likely. Georgia needs to score in all 4 quarters. First quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. Score at the beginning of the game to make sure that Alabama doesn't get off to a fast start. Score at the end of the game to make sure that Georgia finishes stronger than it has the last three times that it's played Alabama. Alabama has shown itself to not be as strong as Georgia over the course of the season. But these kinds of games have a way of being tight. These kinds of games have a way of being closely decided. And if Georgia wants to finish the game as well as it started the game in the previous instances when it's played Alabama, that to me is that simple step. Georgia needs to score in all four quarters on Saturday, regardless of what the score is. Whether Georgia got the halftime lead, they're trying to extend that lead, or they got a halftime deficit, they're trying to get even with Alabama. Regardless of if Georgia's winning or losing, how much it's winning or losing by, simply score in all four quarters. That doesn't guarantee a win on Saturday, but that takes a big step towards, I believe, making a win more likely. Now, as it turns out, finally, here very late in the year, the Georgia offense is starting to get some of the attention that I believe that it deserves. The historic nature of the Georgia defense is obscuring the fact that the Georgia offense has actually performed really well this season. And the other thing about this is, and we don't shy away from saying this around here, the way in which Georgia's done it offensively this year is a little bit weird. Stetson Bennett was not the expected starter, but as it turns out, he has been the guy that's helped lead Georgia in part to some of the success. All kinds of injuries at wide receiver, the kind of thing that if you could have told me back in the spring that Georgia was going to be dealing with such a long season with so few of the guys that I expected to be leading receiver types for UGA, I would have been pretty concerned to think that was going to last as long as it has during the year, and yet the results for Georgia have still been almost as good as I could have ever expected, regardless of who was playing here this year. That's been the story for Georgia for the entirety of the season. It's been obscured, but now it's getting some attention. So if we're saying that one of the big keys for Georgia on Saturday, find a way to score in all four quarters, maybe now people are kind of realizing, well, this Georgia offense, which is in SEC play, points per game, yards per play, all the ways in which smart people measure this stuff now, Georgia passed those tests with flying colors. Maybe this Georgia offense really is ready to do that on Saturday. A couple things from Kirby Smart that also backed up there as well. The quarterback who helped Georgia build that first half lead the last time it played Alabama was also part of some turnovers there late, which allowed Alabama to ultimately get the come from behind victory in Tuscaloosa. Is also expected to start Saturday's game too. That's Stetson Bennett. And Smart did not shy away on Saturday, or I should say back on Monday, of saying that looking ahead to this Saturday, Stetson Bennett will play a pivotal role in just how successful Georgia's offense can be. This is Kirby Smart.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is, number one, protection. How well can you protect and allow him to, because no quarterback's very good without protection. I think we've seen all good quarterbacks have rough days when the protection's not there. So the first thing you have to do is protect him well. You have to have a plan. He has to understand the plan. You have to avoid adverse situations. You get yourself in a bunch of third and longs, I don't care who your quarterback is. He's going to struggle because those take longer routes downfield to develop if you're going to try to get a first down. And experience. That's the number one thing that Stetson's been able to grow from, is looking back at that game. I don't know what that was, his second, third, I don't remember, fourth start. And, he's played a lot more football now, and certainly has improved in terms of decision making. But that's a critical piece to every game, is that player at that position makes so many decisions during the game that the outcome is usually affected a lot by the quarterbacks that play in the game.
Yeah, I think everything that Kirby Smart says there is true. There's no doubt that Stetson Bennett is a far improved version of himself compared to when he played at Alabama a year ago. But Saturday is a different kind of game for him. He's going to be making bigger throws than, for the most part, he's been expected to make throughout this season. Georgia just hasn't trailed very much. Georgia just hasn't been in close football games, very much. And therefore, there's just a lot less pressure on a quarterback when that's true. We're not going to shy away from saying that on Saturday, Bennett's going to be playing in a challenging situation that is far different for the most part than what he's played in thus far this season. It's a great opportunity for him to go ahead and put all of that growth and improvement and everything that's made Bennett a special player for Georgia. Saturday is a great platform for him to go out there and put all of that on display. But as Smart said, there's also the nature of the protection here too. One of the things that makes Alabama challenging is, while on a player-by-player basis, the defense for the Crimson Tide nowhere near as good as what Georgia's has been, the individual player that we all know, Will Anderson, that's the kind of guy you got to be very well aware of. Now, he's not the only guy capable of generating pass rush. They've got, Toto and, LeBron Ray, other guys like that. But in the case of Anderson, he is the one that stands out amongst the rest of the crowd. And so whether Jamari Salyer is healthy enough, able to play or not, or whether you're calling on Broderick Jones to do that or asking Darnell Washington to also chip in and be a part of that there too, blocking Bennett long enough for him to make some throws, that's going to be a big part of this Georgia offensive story on Saturday. But one more thing, and we'll get ready to wrap this up and move on to something else. As I said a moment ago, it seems like now that fewer teams are playing and there's a bigger spotlight on this admittedly very big game, all of a sudden things are being considered that maybe just weren't considered enough a couple of weeks ago. And people are becoming aware of just how successful Georgia has been offensively to complement the historic nature of the Georgia defense. And the guy who ultimately deserves the most credit for this is undoubtedly Todd Monken. Monken is not a Broyles Award finalist, but I don't know how many assistant coaches in the country this year have had better success than what Monken has had through all the injuries and through the responsibility of upgrading an offense that definitely needed upgrading. We're not going to sugarcoat that. Georgia offensively in 2019, the last time it was in the SEC championship game, was just simply not good enough to win a national championship. It just wasn't. I think in 2021, a lot has changed. And this offense now has taken the steps it needs to take to be that kind of offense. And Monken, even from Kirby Smart's words on Monday, was getting a lot of credit for why that is, in concert with a lot of other things going on for this unit right now, more from Kirby on the Georgia offense.
I think we've got good players on offense, and I think Monken's doing a tremendous job of using their skill set. I still don't know if we're as open as we would love to be. We've had injuries at wideout. We've had to do it some different ways. The huge difference in our offense is the production we've been able to have in terms of explosive plays, use of tight ends who are talented. Let's be honest, insert Brock Bowers and insert Darnell Washington. You've increased the talent level at that position. We're using the backs, but I feel like we've used the backs well before, and we've got a good group of wideouts. I think Coach Monken's done a tremendous job of using our personnel where we may not be as big on the offensive line as we've been in the past. But I do think playing good offense is important to your success. You can't be one-sided and expect to be successful.
So listen, I think everything that Smart says there is true, and if I'm going to tell you that I believe that Georgia has to score in all four quarters on Saturday, keep the pressure on Alabama from the beginning of the game to the end offensively, I trust this Todd Monken offensive unit to be able to do that more so than any other that Kirby Smart has. And I'll also say this as a quick aside, and then we'll truly move on. I think it's interesting right there when Kirby speaks, 45 or so seconds about the offense. The two position groups he mentions in particular are what's being done with the running backs right now and what's being done with the tight ends. In every radio interview I believe I've done this week, I've mentioned that over and over, that if I was devising this game plan against Alabama to get the most out of a Georgia offense in a game in which you've got to be at your absolute best, those are the guys that I'm looking to go to. Putting them in motion, multiple backs in the field, multiple tight ends in the field as much as possible, and then throwing out of those sets and just really doing things to flummox Alabama when they've had issues with that. Now, the secondary's been the place where they've been the most vulnerable defensively, but as folks have told us, some of that pre-snap stuff they've had some trouble with there too, the kind of thing that a guy like Todd Monken can be capable of exploiting. That's a lot of the game within the game for me on Saturday. Georgia putting as many of its best players as possible on the field, that is tight ends, that is running backs, and letting a guy like Todd Monken, who has shown himself to be a bit of a diabolical genius, letting him devise all of that and giving Stetson Bennett a chance to do what he's been doing all season long, distribute the football in a highly efficient way. So I expect the Alabama game to be close. Bama games this year have been close. Their losses in previous years have kind of been close there as well. I think the outcome this time can be different than the previous Georgia-Alabama games have been, but I think it's going to take offense from Georgia in all four quarters. Got to score in all four. And if you do, a big step towards victory, I believe that'll be an example of the Dogs taking one. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Good to have you with us here today, whether you're joining us at 9:45 or for our First and 15 on DawgNation.com, the DawgNation app, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, radio at noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast form, Apple, Spotify, all the various podcast platforms. Just really happy to have you with us. And want to make you aware of what's going down tomorrow. Now, hopefully by now you've heard me say this, but listen in closely if you haven't. I know I want your full attention for just a couple seconds, if you don't mind. Tomorrow, we're going to be back at the Marlowe's in Brookhaven for our Chase for the Championship event. I'm going to be there. Jeff Sentell's going to be there. Connor Riley's going to be there. Our buddy John Stinchcomb is going to be there. We'll do a live broadcast, which we're obviously going to invite everybody to be a part of, but a special Q&A and meet and greet off the air there. We'll relax. We'll talk about keys to the victory for Georgia, some recruiting stuff. Undoubtedly, we'll probably come up with this. We'll also enjoy some chef-inspired food, craft cocktails, and everything else. It's the Marlowe's in Brookhaven, 3575 Durden Drive. That's where we're going to be starting at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Get there early so you can get yourself a good seat. We'll be out there on the patio having a great, great time. Y'all, this is going to be so much fun, such a great step towards what's going to happen on Saturday. Obviously, we've got a big day coming up on Saturday there as well. But the kickoff to the weekend is going to be tomorrow night, Marlowe's in Brookhaven. And then after that, we're just shot out of a cannon. High school football on Friday, Chase for the Championship tailgate on Saturday, massive day of coverage from Mercedes-Benz Stadium, live again on Sunday for the college football playoff announcement. But the big thing to begin with, the thing that starts off the weekend is our Chase for the Championship event, Marlowe's in Brookhaven, 6 p.m. tomorrow, 3575 Durden Drive. Can't wait to see you there for that. Now, I'm going to have Mike Griffith coming up in a moment. We'll get a Georgia Farm Bureau practice report coming up from Mike. Injuries, keys to victory, everything else from really both sides. Getting ready for Georgia, Alabama. We'll look forward to doing that with Mike here in just a moment. Before that, though, I want to go around the doghouse. It's furnished today by our friends at Rooms to Go. And this is one of those topics I guess you'll have to kind of put in the category of honesty compels me to admit. Honesty compels me to admit there's a little bit of news, and we can decide how real this really is, but there's a little bit of news involving Georgia defensive coordinator Dan Lanning, or at least suggestions of news. Now, Lanning has been a hot name in the coaching ranks for quite some time. He's been a truly successful defensive coordinator at Georgia. More on that in a moment. He had a chance to leave Georgia this past offseason to take big bucks as a DC at Texas. His name emerged as a potential replacement for Les Miles as head coach at Kansas, and he's just been talked about a lot. Back at the very beginning of the season, early August, when Georgia was first kind of getting going with practice, that was a chance to meet with Dan Lanning there for a moment, and Lanning said at the time, despite all the attention that he was getting for other jobs, he was certainly very comfortable with where he was at UGA, and there were a lot of things about his position as Georgia defensive coordinator that made this the kind of spot that he didn't want to move on from. Let me give you this reminder from Lanning as context for what's happening right now.
Well, first off, I just got to say that I'm forever grateful to Coach Smart for giving me the opportunity to coach at the University of Georgia. You know, it's always been a dream of mine to coach the elite and have an opportunity to compete for championships at the highest level. And I think Georgia provides that. And, you know, they've always been competitive. And when you have good programs, guys are going to get opportunities. But the grass is certainly not always greener. And, you know, I learned that from watching Coach Smart for several years. You know, being where you're at and being successful where you're at, you know, those opportunities will come. But my focus is being here right now.
So that's well said, and that's, you know, part of the reason why Lanning turned down certainly the Texas defensive coordinator job that he had a chance to get this past year. And it's easy to say that when what you're talking about is a lateral move, or even based on the stature of the current programs, maybe a little bit of a step down going to Texas right now. It's a far different situation, though, when your name is kicked around for head coaching openings. And for the moment, Lanning appears to be a part of the rumor mill at Oklahoma. You are aware that Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma to go to USC here this week, and there's going to be more dominoes falling because of that. There's a guy named Dean Blevins, who is a TV reporter, long time there in Oklahoma, and he on Twitter this week has put out a list of the guys that he thinks are the top names for the Oklahoma job, and Lanning is on that list. Can we show you the Dean Blevins tweet here? So this is what he says, updated Dean's list of candidates for the Sooners. He says Georgia's defensive coordinator Dan Lanning, who is called a, quote, young Bob Stoops, Brent Venables, more than a fallback option, Luke Fickell, more likely Notre Dame. He also says keep an eye on Matt Campbell with SEC long shots, Mike Leach, Lane Kiffin. He says gone, Dave Aranda, Matt Rule, Urban Meyer. Now, I think some people probably take this to mean this is what he's reporting that Oklahoma's interested in. It could be this is just what Dean Blevins thinks would be the best names for the Sooners to consider. But nonetheless, you're seeing now Lanning's name kind of come up by a media source close to Oklahoma with a connection to that job. I don't take this all that seriously right now. I mean, Lanning, you see the phrase that Blevins uses there, calls him a young Bob Stoops. That's a huge compliment, but the word that's doing a lot of heavy lifting there in that statement is the word young. I mean, for now, Dan Lanning is still a really young guy. And moving on to become a place like Oklahoma to be head coach there, that'd be a big step up for Lanning, who probably lost out on the Kansas job because Kansas made it pretty clear they wanted a sitting head coach. They wanted someone with head coaching experience, and so that may have hurt Lanning in his pursuit of the Kansas job. But now you got a media guy in the state of Oklahoma kind of mentioning him here for the Oklahoma job. Once again, this is probably more Blevins' opinion, I think, than actual reporting about what Oklahoma is considering. But nonetheless, you're going to hear more of this kind of thing. And obviously, if you're a Georgia fan, the thing you got to understand is there is nothing you can do about this. When you have success, your coordinators are going to get attention. Lanning's getting it now from media types. Monken may get some more of that pretty soon. You may see position coaches start to get talked about here. At some point in time, I believe Del McGee is probably going to be a head coach somewhere, and other guys getting their chance for promotions or whatever's going to go on. You just sort of have to accept this is what comes with the territory, and you really can't count on keeping a guy, much longer than the track record will allow. However, the thing to be reminded of here, though, is even on a team like Georgia where Kirby Smart's a defensive-minded head coach and guys like Will Muschamp are pitching in here, I don't think that Lanning's impact on Georgia can be undersold. That Georgia, over the course of the last couple of seasons, pandemic year a year ago where it was a shortened year, and certainly here in 2021, we have seen the pass rush for the Bulldogs come into full fruition. Previous Georgia defenses were good. They were limiting yards. They were limiting points, but they weren't getting after quarterbacks. Well, on Saturday, we've always kind of said that the magic number for Georgia was that 40-plus sack number. That's what we wanted to see Georgia get for a full season. Well, Georgia didn't just get that for a full season. They accomplished that in the regular season on Saturday. They got as much as 3 games still yet to come here this year, and they're already above 40 sacks for the year. That's the impact of Lanning as he's growing into his role of Georgia defensive coordinator that's allowing that to take place. So the Blevins thing, I don't know that I take it all that seriously, that Dan Lanning's a real candidate for the job at Oklahoma. As a fan of Lanning, I'm happy to see him get mentioned in this kind of regard because, honestly, that's a top 10 level job, and that'd be a really cool thing for one day Lanning to be able to have. But one way or another, enjoy Lanning while you have him because it's his aggressive personality that I think is making a huge impact on this Georgia defense right now. So that's kind of what's out there on that, and that is Around the Doghouse. And it's furnished today by our friends at Rooms To Go. And so many of you were all over Rooms To Go over the course of the last little bit. Holiday shopping season has started, and you have plenty more chance to be at your local Rooms To Go and getting that furniture that you need to kind of go into the new year with, holiday gift, or if you just want your house to look good for some of those holiday parties you have going on. Rooms To Go is the one to know for all of that, whether it be the simple accent piece, the single piece of furniture, or the thing that Rooms To Go is probably the most famous for, which is furnishing that entire room there in your house. Rooms To Go can do all of that for you. You can start your shopping experience online at roomstogo.com. You can stop by one of their showrooms and feel, touch, lay on, sit on the furniture that you will eventually call home, whether it be bedroom furniture, living room furniture, dining room furniture, children's bedroom furniture, outdoor patio type furniture to take advantage of that outdoor living space. Rooms To Go can do all that for you. They furnish Around the Doghouse for us here today, and you can find out more about what they can furnish for you. Check out roomstogo.com. That's roomstogo.com, or just stop by one of their showrooms and see it for yourself here today. All right, great to have you here on our program, DawgNation Daily. We'll talk college football playoff top 25 and how that impacts Georgia in a little bit. We will get into where Jordan Davis stands right now. Hashtag JD to NYC. Sincere thanks to all of you who've kept that hashtag going and really kept the push going that we started for Jordan Davis and his Heisman campaign. Thanks to all of you who've been so great in all of that. And we'll tell you where it stands with JD right now with that ESPN vote that's ongoing. We want to get him to New York. We want to make him a Heisman finalist. There's more chatter about defensive players right now than you ever would have imagined, and Davis is right there. We've got to make sure that he stays at the head of the pack on all of that. So we'll do that coming up here in just a little bit. But for now, here on DawgNation Daily, big game on Saturday. Georgia prepping for it right now. Let's learn more about that. We get a Georgia Farm Bureau practice report with Mike Griffith here today on DawgNation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We will say hello to Mike Griffith here. Always great to have him on a Wednesday. Georgia Farm Bureau practice report with Mike, getting some information about the Dogs and the Crimson Tide. Of course, Mike was in Auburn on Saturday for the Iron Bowl. Mike, before we get into Georgia, Alabama, let me pick up with you where I was just speaking. You know, I do expect Dan Lanning's name to come up in some of these coaching searches. It may just be rumor mill type stuff. It may just be, the hot name, best coordinator on a really good unit. But I think it shows his evolution as a name that folks know. He's a Broyles Award finalist. He's in the mix for all of that. And it's just one of those things as a Georgia fan you kind of have to make peace with, like all college ball playoff contenders do, that if you're having a good enough season, your coordinators are going to be in demand. My guess is we hear Lanning's name kicked around a lot here over the course of the next couple of months.
Yeah, as we should. I mean, look at what Mel Tucker has done since leaving Kirby's staff, going to Colorado, and certainly Michigan State being the Big Ten Coach of the Year. You look at what Sam Pittman has done. Shane Beamer with some success. Now, Kirby's not the only coach that those men worked under. Tucker and Pittman are veterans of the trade that worked under several coaches. Beamer as well-traveled. But still, they pick up a lot on what they learned working at Georgia for Kirby Smart. We had him on DawgNation. Sam, Mel, and Shane all did shows on DawgNation in the spring and talked a lot and favorably about their time with Kirby Smart. So I think that Dan is a very capable guy. I think he'll have plenty of opportunities. The question is, when will he be ready? You saw Kirby Smart had many opportunities before he left Alabama for his dream job. And I guess my question is, what would be Dan Lanning's dream job? Could he be hired at Duke? Sure he could. He'd be a good coach at Duke. But do we think he would cash in his hand to coach a program like that? That's what we don't know, and only time will tell.
Yeah, the other thing I'll add to this, too, is and this is just important for me to keep kind of putting out there in the universe, for as fortunate as Georgia is to have a sharp defensive mind like Kirby Smart, maybe the sharpest of them all, and a guy like Will Muschamp now on staff that, although he's special teams coordinator, certainly has some influence on that defense. That's an incredible luxury there as well. I don't think that the role that Lanning in particular plays in all of this should be obscured in any form or fashion. For as good as those defensive minds I just mentioned were, I think it's Lanning who should get a lot of the credit for the way in which the Georgia defense has transformed the last couple of seasons. This is a much better pass rush team really in the last 2 years than it was in 2019. Stingy defense, but not impactful, not havoc plays, not things like that. Yet in a short pandemic season a year ago, they were better rushing the passer from a statistical standpoint than they had been. This year, already 40-plus sacks going into the postseason. That's a phenomenal number, way higher than even what Georgia did in a 15-game season back in 2017. I think it's Lanning in particular, because of the way that he speaks and because of the way this has grown under his watch in a way that did not exist before he became defensive coordinator. Mike, I think it's Lanning in particular that ought to get credit for that impact of the way that Georgia's grown defensively, because if Georgia does win the national championship this year, I believe that's going to be a big reason why.
Oh, no question. I'm with you. Dan deserves a lot of credit. The players love him. I remember Kirby talking about how he thinks outside the box. A couple of years ago when Mel left and we didn't know who the next DC would be, and they threw Lanning out there for the press conference. It's kind of like, okay, is it going to be Dan Lanning? And Kirby said, he did some things outside the box, and one of those games against Auburn that impressed Kirby. And the way he communicates with the staff, he's very well liked. When he does leave, he's going to take some guys with him. That's the other thing that will happen. You just wonder who goes with Dan Lanning and who stays. It all might be a moot point, though. I mean, Dan Lanning may be coming back. You just don't know when a coach feels like he needs to cash in his hand. I mean, right now these salaries are seemingly skyrocketing. Georgia's going to lose a lot of their defensive front. I'd put it at 50-50 that Dan Lanning's back next year.
Yeah, he's still a very young guy. People should kind of keep that in mind there as well. Turning our attention to the game itself there on Saturday, Mike, you've obviously been following the situation in Athens closely. You were in the Iron Bowl this past week for Alabama and Auburn. I think the one thing that I'll start with on the Alabama side here quickly, and you saw this in person yourself, and at least I think you'll agree with this, is that it remains to be seen, how good Alabama is in comparison to the rest of the teams in 2021. They're, still right there in the college football playoff conversation. But this is not an Alabama team that's on par with what Alabama, I think, has had in the past. As we said off the top of our program today, they're playing more close games than we've seen them play in the past. They had a hard time putting away an Auburn team, albeit on the road on Saturday, but that's a place where Georgia won easily a few weeks prior to that. That on a week-to-week, game-to-game basis, there's just no doubt that Georgia's been the better of those two teams. That doesn't guarantee anything for Saturday, but you can't help but notice that going into the game here this weekend.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, this will be the weakest Alabama team that Georgia's probably faced, maybe pre-Saban. I mean, the offensive line is giving up, I think, 36 sacks. It's 12th in the league. And, Bryce Young is magical as he is, and, his mobility is really impressive. He's really quick back there, really keeps his eyes downfield, an accurate passer. He can't do it alone. He's only got two wideouts that are real dangerous. The big blow to Bama, though, BA, I mean, losing Brian Robinson was a huge blow. I mean, that's a 225-pound battering ram, third in the league in rushing. I mean, he was a real weapon. That's an NFL running back right there, and I don't know that he'll be back. It looked like he pulled a muscle on that 37-yard run in the third quarter against Auburn, and you lose him, and now Alabama's down to one back. Trey Sanders, that's it. That's the only scholarship back that they've got with experience. And the 2 and 3 would be some five-star that hasn't played yet, and a linebacker would be the three running backs. So not a lot of depth at running back. Really porous offensive line outside of Evan Neal. Of course, he's a top 5 or top 10 draft pick. But other than that, they have not performed well, and they've been sporadic on offense. It's kind of come in spurts, like you said. We've seen them light some teams up, and then they didn't score until the fourth quarter against Auburn the other night. And really the first time Alabama had been shut out in 52 games, going back to the first half of the 2017 national championship game. So, no, it's not your typical Alabama team because of the line play, particularly on the offensive line. And as we know, that's Georgia's strength. So that's going to be a real challenge for Alabama to try to protect Bryce Young against this Georgia front. So far, nobody's had a whole lot of success. I guess Tennessee's had the most success, hit some deep plays early, scored 10 points in the first quarter, and then didn't score again until there were 3 minutes left. So I think things bode very well for Georgia. When it comes to that matchup, it would take an unbelievable performance for Bryce Young to win this football game.
Still expect the game to be close, though. I am picking Georgia to win, but I'd be surprised if it's not a tough four-quarter battle. That's typically what it takes to beat Alabama. Every play is going to be magnified in a game like that if it plays out the way that I just suggested. The other thing that I said before you joined us is, Mike, if you look at the one thing that Georgia didn't do in its 3 previous losses to Alabama, and I'm going to kind of throw out the 2020 game because that's just a little bit of a different thing all the way around to me. Much better teams in 2017, 2018 that battled Alabama in those championship game scenarios. Not scoring points in the fourth quarter, not scoring a ton in the second half. I said I like simple things. I like simple statements. And a simple statement for me is a Georgia offense that's been good against everybody all year long is going to be good on Saturday there as well. I think Georgia's got to score in all 4 quarters to give itself the best chance of winning. That's the one thing that hasn't gone well in the past. It's the one thing that if you want to use the season-long advantage you've had over Alabama to your advantage again on Saturday, you got to score in all 4 quarters.
Well, there's a lot of scenarios for how this game could play out. I mean, this game could be over with by halftime. If Georgia's able to turn Alabama over, able to get to Bryce Young and force turnovers. You hate to bring injuries into the equation, but Bryce Young is a slight guy. He's not the biggest guy in the world, and he's being chased by guys that are going to be making millions of dollars hitting NFL quarterbacks here in the next couple of years, first and second round picks. So, the Alabama's got to survive that first half to have any chance. And I'm just not sure that that's what's going to happen. Again, there's a lot of scenarios. If Georgia has been getting off to slower starts in SEC games, that's another factor. Does Georgia get off to a slow start? You think about, the game against Florida, 0-0, 3-0 with 3 minutes left in the first half before the defense breaks through and forces the turnovers and the 21 points in 3 minutes, which was, to me, still one of the most fascinating moments of the season. They're trailing Tennessee 10-7 after 1 quarter. They're leading Missouri 7-3 after 1 quarter, needing a 4th down pass. They have not been fast starters in the SEC games. Or do they start fast in this one? Do they turn Alabama over? To your point, if it gets into a 4-quarter game, Alabama has played those games. Their last 3 games have been 1-score games. I don't want to say they're comfortable with that, but they're familiar with that. How would Georgia respond in that situation? What would the Georgia offense do if it needed to come from behind? These are scenarios that we haven't seen because Georgia's been so good. They've been very effective and very efficient with Stetson Bennett, taking these shot plays. Maybe not the highest completion percentage in the league, but when they connect, they're connecting better than anyone for an average of more yards per play and per pass play than anyone. So when they've hit the pass, they've hit it well. It's been off of the run game. They're a play-action team. There's no secret in that. Most effective offenses are, and Kirby's going to try to establish the run. And Brandon, to me, that's the whole key to the game. If Georgia's able to run the ball effectively, this will be a blowout. Simple as that.
Yeah,
if they can run the ball effectively, it'll be a blowout.
I can't go there. I mean, you may be right. There are plenty of Georgia fans I've already heard from on our comment section that agree with you. I just can't get there. I expect this to be a close football game, but it's certainly interesting to hear the way in which you break it down. The other thing I think is interesting here, if you want to stay on the Georgia offense for a moment, Alabama defensively has been most vulnerable with its secondary, and obviously Georgia needs to try to exploit that on Saturday. But the best version, to me, of the Georgia offense, the thing this group does better than anything, and this is all to Todd Monken's credit because, this is just smart play calling. When they have multiple tight ends, multiple backs in the game, when they throw out of that set, they never look more like an NFL team than when they have that, two backs, two tight ends, and when they're sending those guys in motion and throwing to those guys and doing all that kind of stuff. That's just the best version of Georgia to me. And if I was, if I had Todd Monken's brain inside my head and I was trying to design a game plan for Saturday, I believe that's the button I'd want to try to push as much as I possibly can. How do you get these multiple tight ends in the game? How do you get these multiple backs in the game? And how do you throw to them? Because those playmakers have shown you they're absolutely capable of doing something with it. And if I know that, then Alabama probably knows that too, which means in the case of Brock Bowers in particular, they're going to try to do something to maybe try to take him away. But that, to me, is Georgia's at its best right now. Sending those guys in motion and throwing to them and doing creative things like that. I expect to see a lot of that on Saturday.
Yeah, I think Alabama's going to have to play a really risky defense. I mean, we saw that's what Auburn did against Alabama, and I think Alabama's going to have to gamble, and somebody's band's going to play. I think Georgia's going to, if Stetson finds the open guy, there's going to be some big plays because they're going to gamble. They're going to gamble. They're not going to play too deep very much. They're going to play single high. They're going to bring that guy down in the box because of what you just said. Georgia likes to use that ace formation with two tight ends, sometimes three tight ends.
Yeah.
And you've got the running backs that can catch the ball. And don't forget, Stetson can run the ball. I mean, I saw him carry for a couple of first downs against Georgia Tech, and that's what he brings you. That mobility, as Kirby said, that extra hat in the box that you've got to account for, or Stetson will tuck it and run. And that's where Alabama's going to be challenged. Is not only do they have to account for all these players, as you said, but they've got to account for Stetson Bennett off the scramble. And he doesn't need to make a living to it. He doesn't need to run it 9 or 10 times. He only needs to do it 2 or 3 times, and that's enough. Keep moving the chains. Hope that Todd Lesney's kicking the field goals. Looks like he's been strong of late. Those early season floaters that we saw, I haven't seen those in a while. He looks steady, strong. Hope the special teams is up to par. No reason to believe that they won't be. Again, most scenarios would call for Georgia to win this game comfortably. I'm not saying that Alabama can't win. I'm just saying that if you play this out in your mind and you look at all the different scenarios, there's a reason Georgia's a prohibitive favorite, and the only reason they're not favored by more is because the betting public remembers those Alabama games. And they go, well, it's Alabama. But as you pointed out yourself, Brandon, it's not the same Alabama.
Yeah, let me talk to you more about that in a moment. Let me tell people what we're doing, then I want to talk to you more about that, and then we'll let you get ready to get going here today. It's our Georgia Farm Bureau practice report with Mike Griffith. Of course, Georgia Farm Bureau has been here for the folks in the state of Georgia for decades and decades. Since 1959, they've been taking care of you, and for so many of the folks who listen and watch us on a daily basis, hardworking folks trying to get to work each and every day, need dependable transportation to be able to do that. And, of course, when you think about dependable transportation, you think about dependable auto insurance provider there for you as well, because that's a really important part of that equation. And that's what Georgia Farm Bureau is, dependable. They keep their promises to all of their folks. They live, work, and play in communities just like yours and mine all across the state of Georgia. Local agents, claims adjusters, friendly folks there on all ends of that spectrum, taking care of you when it comes to the auto insurance situation. That's why Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. You can find out more, gfbinsurance.com. gfbinsurance.com. You can find out more about what Georgia Farm Bureau is bringing to the table on all of that. All right, Mike, 2 things. We'll let you go here. Thing number 1 is this. I can't undersell Alabama here, though, because while this is not, historically good Tide team the way it's been in the past, they're the only team that comes close to rivaling Georgia when it comes to offensive and defensive efficiency nationally. This is clearly the toughest opponent this year that Georgia could play. And the fact that Alabama's played close games in SEC play, I'm not going to let that, convince me that somehow this team wouldn't run roughshod over most of the rest of the country. So I do think it's really important here not to undersell Alabama. While this may not be a historically good team, there's still no guarantee this doesn't turn out to be the second or third best team in the country for here this season and the toughest challenge that Georgia's likely to face on its way to a national championship. It's just really important to make sure that I get that out there.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think a lot of people are familiar with the piece that ESPN's David Hale did about how you beat Georgia, right? And how teams with good defenses have actually fared better. The three best defenses that Georgia's faced, and this is kind of crazy when you hear it out loud, Clemson, Florida, and South Carolina. You think those are really the three best defense? Yeah, they really are. And that's kind of crazy. Alabama is a step up. You're right, Brandon. Their front seven is very good, and there's talent in the back. But Georgia's gotten better. Stetson Bennett has gotten better. I thought he played his best game against Georgia Tech. I mean, he looked so comfortable back there. The throw to Burton was really on point. Very accurate. The timing is really good. Comfortable moving around in the pocket. So you've got a quarterback that's playing red hot right now. You've got an offensive line. I mean, my goodness, did Kirby Smart really say out loud that he's not worried about the left tackle position if his Jamari Salyer can't play?
Yeah.
I mean, Jamari might be one of the top 3 or 4 offensive linemen in the league. And Georgia's depth and talent is to the point where Kirby's like, we're not real worried. Broderick's done a good job there. I mean, it's incredible. Alabama's down to 1 scholarship quarterback, and you got a guy in Dejon Edwards. I think would probably start for 2/3 of the team and 2/3 of the teams in the league, and he only gets garbage time. Kenny McIntosh exploding. This will be the second time in the last 3 years he's had the longest run from scrimmage. And don't forget, Brandon, from that KM Squared show we did when Kenny told the story about his recruiting visit to Alabama, and he was in the coach's office and he looked down on a piece of paper and they had running backs in tiers, and they had him written down as a second-tier running back. He's never forgotten that. That's a guy who's going to have added motivation. So I really like the matchup here for Georgia. I like what Kirby Smart's put together. This is by far and away the most talented team in the country. They're head and shoulders above everyone else. Complete confidence that Kirby and his staff are going to have a game plan. They've got Nick Saban right where they want him. To your point, yes, maybe Alabama is the second or the third team, but that's more of an indictment on college football than anything else. Georgia looks like they're in a league of their own to me.
Well, let me finish with this really quickly, and we'll do this in a kind of one fell swoop here. Obviously, a lot of injuries to be aware of. You mentioned the Jamari thing. So give me Jamari, give me Christopher Smith, give me Pickens Kieras, give me Kendall Milton. Anybody that I'm leaving out here? Just give me an overarching look at this group here right now.
Yeah, the most concerning injury for this game in the playoff is Christopher Smith.
No doubt.
And that's if Alabama is able to protect and keep Bryce Young upright long enough for him to look downfield, which not many teams have been able to do. And he may just want to snap the ball, just throw it as far as he can, as high as he can, and hope for the best. My goodness. But the Smith injury is certainly the most pressing. I think they do need Jamari back for the stretcher, and I hope he'll be back soon. I like what he brings to the run game. Again, I think Georgia's ability to run the ball is what sets the play action up, and that's the whole key to the championship run in my mind. Kendall Milton is a fantastic talent and a fantastic back, but if he wasn't ready for Tech, I wonder if you throw him in a game like this. I don't think so. Don't think we see him until Dallas, presuming that's I assume they're going to win this game. I think they'll go to Dallas as well. George Pickens, not a big factor, but not because George isn't talented. There's just not a lot of targets to go around. I mean, if this game goes like I think it will, Stetson will throw 17 or 18 passes and they'll run it 40 times. Because that's what Georgia does, and that's okay. They're going to power it, man. They're not going to take any more chances than they need to. Now, when they do throw it, they're going to be effective. They're going to complete 14 or 15 of those passes, probably for 250, 270 yards. If you're going to profile Georgia, that's what it looks like. So Pickens, maybe gets a couple targets and catches 1 or 2 balls for 67 yards, but it's not like the good old days where he's playing with Jake Fromm catching 12 passes in the first half or catching 8 balls from J.T. Daniels. That's not this offense, and that's okay, because one of the guys he will target that will catch 3 or 4 is number 19. And I would say this, Brandon, I don't know that I've seen a tight end with this much impact on a championship team, on any college football championship team. Brock Bowers has been unbelievable. I think we've undersold it. I don't think we've talked about it enough. I think he's a candidate for the freshman of the year. I think he should be a first-team All-American, and I think we should have him up on billboards. I'm not sure. Maybe Georgia Power should make it Georgia Bowers. I don't know. We need some NIL money for Brock Bowers next year because this guy is a game changer. I don't know. Back when I used to play NCAA football, I used to say, man, it'd be great if I could just plug some of these legends in. Is he Red Grange? Is he Jim Thorpe? He's a throwback. He's dominant. It's so much fun to watch Brock Bowers, and I guarantee you it's keeping Nick Saban up at night. He mentioned him the other day on his teleconference, number 19.
Yeah, for sure. An amazing season and really a very consistent year for the most part for Georgia, which has been kind of nice to see playing great against Tech this past Saturday. Mike, thanks for your time here for the Georgia Farm Bureau Practice Report. We will certainly see you a lot in the days to come, including at Mercedes-Benz Stadium there on Saturday for the big showdown for the SEC Championship, Georgia and Alabama. Mike, thanks for your time. We'll talk to you later on.
Thanks, B.A. Have a good one.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Look, for everybody who's saying that it might end up being a convincing Georgia win, you may turn out to be right on that. I just can't get there, though. And it's not about, BA, you don't have enough confidence. It's not about that. I mean, look, Alabama, if you want to start using like FPI data or SP Plus or all that kind of stuff, I mean, Alabama is the one team in the country that comes the closest of matching what Georgia's been able to do this year. Georgia's top 5 in both categories, offense and defense. The only other team that even approaches being top 10 is Alabama. You got teams like Oklahoma and Ohio State. They're great offensively but terrible defensively. Wake Forest kind of in that category too. You get a team that's really good defensively, not necessarily great offensively. Ohio State comes the closest to being both. For those of you that love high school football, and I do, last week there were 3 examples in Georgia high school football of number 1 playing number 2 in the state quarterfinals. The reason why that can't happen is there's no seeding in Georgia high school football. You just match up the regions and you just play how that works out, and sometimes you play the best team in the semifinals, the quarterfinals. It's not always a thing that the 2 best teams play in the state finals. Sometimes it is, and it's not always. In this particular case, college football kind of works out the same way there too. That I think it is a tremendous disservice to this game to act like, Georgia by the second half is going to be playing, whoever, walk-on players in the game. That's a tremendous disservice to the game. Alabama doesn't get beat like that very frequently. Frankly, Georgia has had its issues second half against Alabama in the past. I don't make too big of a deal about that going to this game, but you have to acknowledge this is a gigantic hill that Georgia climbs over. And, to act like it was a foregone conclusion going into the game that Georgia was going to walk away with this win, I think that does a disservice to the celebration that ought to ensue once Georgia wins. And that's really what it comes down to here, is that if Georgia wins this game on Saturday, despite the fact you got college football playoff coming up and all the things that will matter there, this ought to be a celebration for the ages on Saturday. It should, because you got 24 hours to enjoy that win before you got to start thinking about making travel plans for Miami or Dallas or thinking about who you might be playing in the college football playoff. It ought to be a celebration for the ages on Saturday if and when Georgia gets off over the hump against Alabama. And I don't want anything being said that obscures that, this notion of, Georgia's way better than Alabama, going to walk in there and just stomp all over them. No. We're not on this show. We are not taking that tack. That may turn out to be true, but we are anticipatory for the game so that we can celebrate when it's over. This is a big one for Georgia on Saturday. I expect it to be close. I expect the Dogs to emerge, but I expect a real challenge there. By the way, speaking of celebrations, one of the things we're going to do from a celebration standpoint is when this season's finally done, we think it's going to be done halfway through the month of January, but when this season is finally done, we're going to be on our way on a wonderful cruise with our friends at Royal Caribbean, Independence of the Seas, leaving out of Cape Canaveral, going to Nassau in the Bahamas, going to Perfect Day, Coco Cay. A part of all of that, it's April 25th through the 29th. It's a 4-night cruise going out of Port Canaveral on Independence of the Seas. Special Dog Nation cruise, bigger than anything we've ever done in the past. This is going to be incredibly fun, but the time is now to get your plans made to be a part of the cruise. You got to book your travel for all of this, so it's on sale. Our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority are helping us with all of this. If you go to DawgNation.com, you can get linked up with the Cruise and Vacation Authority and get locked in for the Dog Nation cruise. Y'all, do this now as a special holiday gift. You know, for that person that you want to surprise with something really great here this holiday season. You know, we'll give you, figure out something to put in the box, but, have that gift ready to be opened up, and you open up, hey, you're going to the Dog Nation cruise. No better holiday gift than that. April 25th through the 29th, me, Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, special guests maybe stopping by there as well. Fun event, leaving Port Canaveral, Nassau, perfect day Coco Cay on the Independence of the Seas. Go to DawgNation.com, find the link to get in there and book your travel to be on the Dog Nation cruise with us. It's going to be a great time. All right, let's talk about the chaos that could ensue here as championship weekend takes place on Saturday. College football playoff top 25 came out last night. Let me give you a quick look at all of this. And let's talk about the teams that we think are still alive here for a moment. Obviously, Georgia's at number 1. Michigan moves up to number 2. No real surprise there. Bama stays at 3. Cincinnati stays at 4. Oklahoma State moves up from 7 to 5. And so here's what I think you have. I think you have 7 teams who are potentially still alive for the college football playoff. Some people might say 8. They might include Baylor. I don't, because Baylor's obviously playing in the Big 12 title game on Saturday. I think there are 7 teams still alive here. I think it's obviously the top 6, and I'm also going to include Ohio State in that as well. Now, I know that sounds crazy, and people kind of don't want to hear that, but I would include Ohio State is still alive for the college football playoff. So this is what it comes down to. Michigan plays as a big favorite against Iowa. I mean, can Iowa keep it close? We can debate that. We probably will on Go With The Flow later on this week. But one way or another, Michigan probably wins. That's a ticket punched. Georgia at number 1, undefeated. The clearly best team in the country thus far. I've been hesitant to want to say this, but now I think you probably can say Georgia ticket has been punched for the college football playoff. It's simply a matter of seeding now and also a chance to maybe eliminate Alabama. But Alabama at number 3, while for the last couple of weeks, it seems like we were trending away from the possibility of, a 2-loss Alabama making the college football playoff. I think they're kind of now back part of that discussion again, because think about Cincinnati at 4 there, has not really been week to week very impressive. Gets a chance to play Houston on Saturday. That's a ranked team in the American Athletic Conference championship game. Let's see if Cincinnati can hold on to its spot right there. Or, let's see what happens in the Big 12 title game between Oklahoma State and Baylor. Oklahoma State got some help last week to beat Oklahoma. This notion that they kind of slide into that spot, not easy to imagine. Also, I think it'd be interesting to see if Bama plays Georgia close and it's a side-by-side comparison between Bama and Oklahoma State. Probably Oklahoma State gets the nod there at that spot, but you can't be 100% sure. Notre Dame sits there at 6. This is a team that's been kind of quietly hanging around now for a while, but you had Gary Barta, playoff selection committee chairman, last night talk about the possibility of, Notre Dame without a coach. He says that wasn't considered in the rankings last night, but kind of setting the stage for Notre Dame possibly being excluded from the playoff if they were to have an opportunity to slide in because Brian Kelly's no longer there. And so that's what brings, at least partially, maybe only by a thread, but that's what partially brings Ohio State back in the discussion for me here too. The argument being, well, they only lost to maybe the Pac-12 champion Oregon, or they only lost on the road in the snow to Michigan. And if you wanted to spin that narrative for Ohio State, you possibly could do it. That there's probably not a huge appetite for the Big 12 champion, although you may have to take them. There may be no longer much of an appetite on the part of the committee for Notre Dame because they no longer have Brian Kelly, and it just kind of looks weird taking a team like that in the playoff. They'd love to exclude Cincinnati if they have any choice whatsoever. So with Georgia and Michigan the most likely playoff teams, I think what happens in these rankings between 3 and 7, with the 2 potential 2-loss teams sandwiching that discussion, I think that's far from concluded. If you want the simplest, safest bet, you might say Georgia, Michigan, Oklahoma State, and Cincinnati. Maybe that's the simplest bet, or the safest bet, but I don't know that it's the only possible outcome we have here. But if you're a Georgia fan, consider this just for a moment. If you're talking about a scenario where the playoff is what I just described a moment ago, getting past Alabama, maybe eliminating them from the discussion, and then only having to worry about Michigan, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State. Could it really work out that easily for Georgia? And I don't want to be overconfident, but I'm also not a coach. I don't have to give you coach speak. That's the kind of college football playoff that you should certainly expect Georgia to dominate. It will make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. Important update on Jordan Davis coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, our friends at the Finnish Long Drink. Folks have asked me, B.A., do you really like the Finnish Long Drink as much as you say you do? Yes, I do. Does my family really like it? Not my family. My wife. She's the one in my family that gets to drink that. Yes, she really likes that there as well. And for those of you that haven't tried it yet, this is the perfect chance to do so. Because if you go to thelongdrink.com, you can find out about the entire story about how it came from Finland in the 1950s, about how it's been here in the United States. I should say it started in Finland in the 1950s. It's been in America now for the last couple of years, in Georgia and all over the place now. Thelongdrink.com, you can see the whole story. You can also put in your zip code and kind of find out where close to you can find some Finnish Long Drink. For holiday parties coming up, this is certainly a great thing to have on stock there for your holiday parties, whether it's the Long Drink Cranberry, the traditional, it comes in the blue can. It's kind of have a grapefruit flavor. Long Drink Strong, that's 8.5% alcohol by volume. Long Drink Zero, 0 carbs, 0 sugar. That's good times there as well. And if you're saying, well, BA, I'm not really quite so sure which of those I might like the best, the great news is right now, wherever you find the Finnish Long Drink, you can also find those 8-can variety packs, which is 2 of each of the versions of the long drink that I just told you about before. So go to thelongdrink.com, find out where the Finnish Long Drink is close to you, and you can enjoy some here for this holiday season. Boy, it makes a holiday party that much more fun and enjoyable. So try yourself some Finnish Long Drink here today. So we have been occupying this golden shoe space the last couple of days with the big ESPN push. Now, if you go to what's the website, promo.espn.com, we'll put a link up. When I post show at DawgNation.com today, I'll put a link to the Heisman voting thing from ESPN. We want to get Jordan Davis over the top here. We want to get Jordan Davis, hashtag JD to NYC. We want to get him to New York City as a Heisman finalist. The voting is ongoing. Now, I couldn't fit this entire thing on one screenshot, so I had to kind of get a little bit creative here. So let me show you where Jordan Davis stands on this as of right before the show began today. So he's at 15% of the total vote. That puts him at number 3 on the voting list right now. So this is the Heisman Trophy voting thing that ESPN's got going on. Y'all keep the Jordan Davis votes going. Hashtag JD to NYC. Let's get Jordan Davis to New York City as a Heisman finalist. Also, Gator, Hater, countdown. How about 332 days from now? Dogs go back to Jacksonville. New coach, same result. Dogs on top. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily. And on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for all your needs there in that regard. Get that water heater replaced for you the same day. They can do that. You want that second opinion. You've been told that you need a new heating system. This time of year, a lot of companies are going to try to tell you that, but maybe not. Maybe you don't need that. Get the famous R.S. Andrews second opinion, and maybe they can tell you how you can get some more life out of the system you already have, because that's what R.S. Andrews does. They want to not just sell you something because they think they can. They want to put a smile on your face, because over the course of time, that's what's been successful for them. Story after story, putting smiles on the faces of those that turn and trust to them. That's been a recipe for great business success for R.S. Andrews, and you'll find out the same thing's true when you turn to them today. So rsandrews.com for a lot more on that. All right, great stuff. So let's get your comments here really quick, and then we'll kind of bounce out of here. A lot going on Wednesday. Please join us for SEC Country Live. Our buddy Mike Johnson going to be on hand for that. I'm really excited about that. I just think it's going to be great. I think Mike's tired of hearing me talking trash about Alabama, so he wants to come in here and be a part of all of that, which is good. That's what you want. Okay, so where am I going? Let me do YouTube first today. Let's go to YouTube first. And let's see what's going on here on the YouTube comment section. Jay Buchanan says Tennessee had a few deep shots that would have been detrimental had they connected. I'm worried that Bama won't miss on those big plays. Just my 2 cents on why I'm cautiously optimistic. Totally true. But here's like the one thing that you got to understand about the Tennessee game is that everything is connected. And so when you see the Tennessee wide receiver open, when you see the quarterback Hooker deliver the football, and when you see that just miss honestly, that looks a lot like a Georgia defensive bust, and maybe in some cases it might have been. But there's also a thing where you got, 20 other guys other than wide receiver, defensive back, who are battling on a play. And one thing that we can't know, our naked eye just doesn't tell us, is what happened before the quarterback delivered the football. Was there enough of a pass rush that it rushed the quarterback even by a fraction of a second? And was his attention turned off the receiver even by, a fraction of a second? And was there something that happened that made even an open receiver harder to deliver the football to? I'm not making excuses for the Georgia defense. Some of the stuff that happened in the Tennessee game, those might have been busts. I saw some of that kind of stuff too. But there's a lot going on a football play. And, this is why you like this Georgia defense better than previous Georgia defenses, is because if you ask a defense to guard anybody for long enough plays, they're going to be open receivers. That's just the way it works. The rules favor the offensive side of the ball. So enough plays defended create open receivers. So what do you do to impact a quarterback's ability to get the football to those open receivers? And that's what Georgia's doing really well right now. So I get what you're saying, and I expect Alabama to probably have a couple of big plays on Saturday as well. I do assume that's probably going to occur. You just can't panic about that. You've got to match your own big plays to go with their big plays, and then get more of them with your own offense or defense. But you're right that these really explosive offenses, Tennessee I do believe has one. These really explosive offenses can get something eventually, and you just got to make sure it doesn't come too much there on Saturday. Let's see what else. Green Soldier says, I know there's a lot of metrics, but here this one, points per series. UGA is third in the nation at 3.4 points. UGA's starting offense has missed 10 to 12 quarters. That's really the thing that probably speaks to the success of Georgia more than anything else. As you said, like the points per series or points per drive, what Georgia's allowing, it's less than a point per drive. It's like 0.3 of a point per drive. As you said, offensively, more than a field goal per drive. I mean, you talk about a net situation, a net drive. Think about like a baseball inning. Georgia gets the ball, opponent gets the ball. A net drive scenario where you're talking about +3 for Georgia each and every time you flip through that over and over and over again. That's why Georgia has dominated as much as it has, and you can't lose sight of that. You just can't. That's a big thing in Georgia's favor. The only team that comes close to matching that at all is Alabama. Let's see what else. Scott Pete says, yes, I agree, B.A. The best teams do not always win, and this could be closer than we want it to be. Yeah, I just think that, first of all, the spread's only 6.5. Okay, so, that, in a one-score game, pretty much anything can happen anyway. So it's not like Georgia's some, overwhelming favorite here. Teams that are favored by 6.5 points win the game outright about 55% of the time. So, it's not like there's some, overwhelming advantage for Georgia there on that. But just look at what it's taken to beat Alabama. And this is where you got to have respect for Nick Saban. And I do have respect for Saban. I like making fun of him. I like doing that kind of stuff. But ultimately, how can you not have respect for what he's accomplished at Alabama? And the assumption that you ought to make is he'll have his team ready to play on Saturday. And that whatever he has in the preparation reservoir, that Georgia's just got more of that. That's what you got to kind of hope for there. JC713 says, I think he's talking to me, your total assessment of the 2019 offense is just overlooking the biggest fact that Georgia lost 5 receivers, 2 right before the season started. It was huge. Every team stacked the box that year. Yeah, I'm not necessarily interested in prescribing, why it went wrong. Injured receivers were a huge factor. But it was still an awful offense, at least at the championship level. It was not good. And injuries were mitigating factors and all that. I'm not looking to play the blame game, although I don't think that James Coley was a particularly effective offensive coordinator. I don't think that he was. That's the one level of blame I'm willing to extend. I thought that Coley was a disaster in his year here. But no matter what the reasons were, the results spoke for themselves. The results now speak for themselves. And if you want to give Todd Monken the full level of credit for what he's accomplished, then I do think you have to make the comparison to what was happening before he got here. And also, Monken's kind of following the footsteps of what we see a lot of times. Jim Chaney was like this. And I know a lot of Georgia fans don't really like Jim Chaney. But 2017, Chaney put a pretty good offense together. And 2018, he really had a pretty good offense too. Awful in 2016. So you see a lot of this where like first-year offensive coordinator, not very good. Second year, things get way better. In the case of Chaney, they kind of did. Remember when Kyle Shanahan was the Falcons' offensive coordinator year before the Super Bowl? Terrible. Second year, record-setting. There's something about like that cycle back through the second year for a lot of these offensive coordinators where great success takes place. I thought Monken was really good a year ago, but the statistical performance this year is even better than that. So you talk about that. Hold on, I got to get to this in a second. You talk about that second year for Monken. I just don't think you can give it enough credit. Did Jeremy change his name to be Ace Cardigan? That's really funny. Yita Cookie says Chaney's problem was that he couldn't adjust if the defense adjusted. Yeah, that's probably true. It might be true. Andrew Hughes says we're going to have 500 total yards, more than that. He says bet the house on that. So I'm very confident, Andrew Hughes. B.A.'s Cardigan says, Bama fans, y'all saw what Kirby did to Tua and Hurts. Y'all ain't got no backup this time, and UGA's defense is better. Bryce is in for a world of pain. Yeah, you've heard me say this before. Obviously Georgia's going to play a clean game, no dirty hits, things like that, but Alabama has been very hesitant to run Bryce Young this year. I don't believe they will be on Saturday because I think that's their best chance to have sustained offense, to get him involved in the running game. We're going to find out, can he take a hit? Honestly, Tua Tagovailoa kind of couldn't. We're going to find out if Bryce Young can. And like Jalen Hurts can. Jalen Hurts is a strong guy. He's got a big body. I thought Hurts was one of the best. I don't know if he's the best running quarterback I've ever seen, but he was probably the best looking running quarterback I've ever seen. When he was running, he looked like a running back. I mean, he really runs. No problem taking a big hit. Let's find out if Bryce Young can. Not dirty stuff and things like that. Of course, we all know that. But let's find out how Bryce Young absorbs blows when he's taking them all day long, something that he hasn't had to do much so far this season. Back on DawgNation.com. Mike Hughes says Darnell Washington going to be the key to slowing down and Will Anderson. I believe that's probably true. I think that's really 100% true. Brandon Griffin says Kirby's always gone more conservative after getting leads against Alabama, which has let them gather momentum and eventually the comeback. Stop playing, quote, not to lose. Always been Kirby's Achilles heel against Saban. Yeah, said this off the top of the program. Got to score in all four quarters. Score early to establish that momentum. Score late to dissuade Alabama from believing they have a chance. Tom says to win it all this year, Bama must beat us twice. Don't think they can do that. Yeah, but, I mean, listen, I'd love nothing more than to be like the homerest homer in the world, because that'd be great for business. I'd love nothing more to tell you. There's no way that Alabama can beat Georgia twice, and I don't believe they could. But I also just couldn't live with myself if I wasn't honest. And honesty compels me to admit that I don't want to play Alabama twice. I'd love to beat them on Saturday and knock them out of the whole thing. It's not because I don't think Georgia could beat Alabama twice, but if Georgia's the favorite on Saturday and that's the expected winner, then the thing I think you should really hope for is that things fall into place so that Georgia doesn't have to beat Alabama twice, even though I'd love to tell you, all right, nobody going to play Georgia close. Georgia going to win every game by 50 points. That'd be great for business if I were to come on here and say all that kind of stuff. And as a fan, I hope that's true. But I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I wasn't projecting the most authentic version of myself. And authentically, I think that it'd be nice to only have to play Alabama once. I do believe that. Dennis Pillardi says, let's add another Georgia championship after the Braves earlier. That'd be great to be able to do. D says, I think it can only be a blowout if Stetson can run effectively to convert third downs. Yeah, his legs on third down, that's a big weapon. It is a big weapon. Rob says James Cook needs a great game. Yeah, I think after the Tennessee game, a lot of us kind of had our attention on James as maybe that most dynamic weapon. I said before that I sort of felt like that there was a guy that was going to emerge late in the year. Somebody mentioned the Braves earlier. The way that like a Soler or, a Rosario, the way that guys like that kind of emerged for Atlanta, that somebody that necessarily wasn't a huge part of the story at the beginning of the year kind of became that guy at the end of the year. At one point, I kind of thought it might be Arian Smith for a number of reasons. I don't know that James Cook necessarily fully counts as what I just said, but Cook may be that guy now. And Facebook, I promise we're coming to you in a moment. TV radio guy says, admit it, you are not confident that Georgia could whip Bama. Nothing wrong with that, but don't say your views are because you're just not confident. Come on, man up. I don't know really what that means necessarily. I am confident the game is going to be close. So if that's the thing that you want, like Georgia's ability to win this game isn't powered by my belief. This is not the sleigh and elf. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not, like, my belief in Georgia winning the game doesn't cause Santa's sleigh to fly. Georgia's going to do what it does on Saturday regardless of how much I believe in it one way or another. Do I think Georgia's going to win? Yes, I do. Do I think the game is going to probably be close? Yes, I do. Why do I feel that way on both accounts? Because that's what the data suggests here. I've also been wrong before. Now, I've gotten the majority of my picks right so far this season, but I've been wrong before, maybe wrong here. But if I'm going to be wrong, I want to be wrong on. I'm more comfortable being wrong on what the data suggests, and that's what this is. Let's see what else. Jermaine King giving you a great reference to Mick from Rocky. I love that. Bob Zamblin says he's got his bourbon ready. He says it's redemption bourbon to get some redemption against Alabama. I like that. J. Bob says he's going to have his going at kickoff. That's good stuff. Scotty B says, what's going to be on my playlist for a Georgia victory? That's a really good question. That's a really good question, Scotty. That's too good of a question for me to give you. Like, one of the things I do, and I realize this is a little bit dorky probably, but sometimes I like to play another state's song in celebration for beating them. It's almost like I'm claiming that as like the spoils of war. Now I'm, a little bit of a country guy, I guess, at this stage of my life. So, like, if Georgia goes up to Knoxville and wins that game, I'm going to, like, blast Tennessee River by Alabama on the way back. I got to just do dumb stuff like that. So I'll probably be stealing some of the Alabama songs as a way of celebrating that victory. Here's the one thing I really want, because I can't stand this. And listen, over the course of your life, if you live long enough in the SEC, you're going to get trolled by every opposing fan base as much as you possibly can. But, like, the one thing I just can't stand is to be on the field when those knucklehead Bama fans start doing the rammer jammer thing. So that's the thing I'd love to see Georgia do right back in Alabama's face, is to do Georgia's own version of the rammer jammer right back in Alabama's face. I'm sure other teams have done that over the years. I think that would be like the biggest possible celebration of all. Twill Dog, it's nice to be remembered. That's awesome. I was on with Chuck here. He also says Dixieland loud. Yeah, that's kind of like, I do have to admit this. I do kind of like the Dixieland thing that Bama does. I think it's funny, how they're always battling about, what the students yell versus what the adults want the students to yell. So there will probably be a little Dixieland delight blared loud if Georgia gets that win. That is probably very true. Jamie Scott says, do you think Oklahoma would want to wait until after the championship game to hire Lanning? Yeah, I mean, I still think Lanning's probably a little young for the Oklahoma job, but I just wanted to share the fact that is at least out there from a guy that's got a pretty big following in Oklahoma. But I think the one thing that you're seeing with this current coaching cycle is, and we're going to go to Facebook to get a few comments. I think the one thing you're seeing with this current coaching cycle is, when Kirby Smart came to Georgia in 2016, it was a little easier to stay at Alabama through the national championship because the signing day wasn't until February. Well, now the early signing period begins in December, so you don't really have as many opportunities to stay at your old job. Now, somehow Florida wasn't capable of negotiating Billy Napier's immediate arrival at their job, which I guess says something about Florida, but it also, says something about the fact that Napier plays Saturday, he's not coaching the bowl game, so he'll be done and be able to focus his attention on Florida after that. But I think for guys who are leaving to become head coaches right now, it's going to be harder for those guys to stay around the old job to do what Smart did back at the end of the 2015 season, because the early signing period just makes that more difficult to do. Over here on Facebook, and then we'll wrap up for today. Hope everybody's getting ready for a good one. Chad Williams says that Lanning might be a good fit at Louisiana to replace Billy Napier. That could be kind of an interesting thing. And here's the one thing that I think is true in 2021, although this is just my suspicion. I can't prove this to be true. You know the way that Mark Richt waited a long time to take a job before he finally went to Georgia, or Kirby Smart waited a long time to take a job before he finally went to Georgia? Most of these schools, even lower-level schools, are paying so much money for coaches now, and they're giving you such long-term contracts now that I just don't think you're going to see very many coordinators turn down head coaching jobs anymore. Now, Louisiana's a little different on that because, that's still a Sun Belt job. But think about, Kansas. I feel like if Dan Lanning could have been Kansas head coach, I believe he probably would have taken that job. And he probably should take that job. They're going to pay you $3 million a year. They're going to give you a 5-year contract. That's guaranteed money of roughly speaking, $15 million or so. And that's the kind of money that, even if you completely flame out, that's still $15 million. You can go back and be the sought-after defensive coordinator. You can actually return back to the role that you're currently in, most sought-after defensive coordinator in college football. You can go back and be that guy again. You just do so with $15 million in your pocket. So I think we're in a day and age now where even the low-level jobs are paying so much for head coaches, and they're willing to guarantee multiple years of those contracts. I don't think you're going to see a lot more guys wait for the perfect job because the money is just too much to turn down. Ricky Kendall says, I've been waiting my whole life for Georgia to win a championship. He says, born in 87, been a Dog fan ever since, so I'm ready to watch these Dogs put in the work. Yeah, boy, I can't wait, Ricky. Looking forward to that there as well. Adrian Carver says, Lanning's not going to waste his street credit on a lower-tier job. It's Power 5 or nothing for him. That may be the case, but a Power 5 job, as I said before, you're getting paid so much money, I believe you're doing that. Keith Venny says, kind of a throwback to the friends in low places after the Clemson game. Yeah, y'all find me Saturday. You better believe I'll be doing now, it's not going to be pretty dancing, but it'll be some dancing. You better believe that. Jason Baker likes what Marcus Freeman's doing there at Notre Dame. Yeah, Freeman may be very close to a head coaching job. He may even get the Notre Dame job. Peter Jeffrey Wilson says, we're going to spend $3 million in Kansas. Yeah, that's probably a fair question. Chris Slim White says, has another walk-on won a national championship, or will Bennett be the first one when Georgia wins it this year? Boy, that is a great question. So if we count Baker as a walk-on, he didn't win the national title, but he did win the Heisman, got in the college football playoff. Is that the most successful walk-on quarterback up until now? This feels like the kind of thing I should know the answer to. I can't really think of anyone more successful. Is Baker Mayfield the best walk-on quarterback? Now, Mayfield was also the number 1 overall pick, which is not really probably the road that Bennett's traveling down, but national championship winning quarterback as a walk-on, I wonder if that's happened. You've had quarterbacks, who were not, necessarily the leaders of their team. I think that Bennett's more so even than some of the guys who've won national championships, even in this century. Not every quarterback that's won a title in this century was necessarily a big-time player. I think that Bennett's actually had a better year as a quarterback than some other guys that have won it, but it's obviously been a long time since you start thinking about some of those guys. But as a true former walk-on, would Bennett have a chance to be the most successful from a team's championship standpoint? That's actually a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. Steve Schaffini on the subject of rematches, he says, you can check the stats on that, and he's also referencing Cincinnati. Yeah, I don't know if the year-over-year thing would be quite as true on that, although there are some similar players on both sides. I think Georgia's better than it was this year. I think Cincinnati's worse than it was a year ago, so I don't quite know about that. But look at the NFL where you see rematches a lot, and you often see a split. In fact, you more often than not see a split in those rematches, and it happens more than chance would typically dictate. Lorenzo Fleming checking in to say good morning, BA and Dog Nation from foggy Southern California, from a Georgia native. My prediction, 35-31. Yeah, that's about what I'm thinking right there, Lorenzo. Game in the 30s, Georgia winning by a touchdown or less. That's about what I'm thinking. Ryan S. Walker says Bama will be doubling up on Bowers. Monken has to find a way to use Washington in the red zone and across the middle of the field and give Bama's defense fits with its mismatch. I think that's all really true. He mentions, running backs there as well. I mean, think about the biggest, and I'm not X's and O's guy. I always feel like the need to caveat that. Like, I'm not trying to be something that I'm not when it comes to something like that. But think about the biggest advantage that tight ends often have. Good tight ends. Kirby Smart's explained this before. The biggest advantage that tight ends often have is they are running a route against a cover matchup that does, as Kirby Smart has said, a guy that doesn't cover for a living, safety, things like that. And so you oftentimes can create a mismatch with your tight end against the fourth best cover guy or the fifth best cover guy for another team. But conversely, if you're as good as Bowers is, in a man situation, Bowers is probably not drawing Bama's fourth or fifth best cover guy anymore. So there's a school of thought in football that, for as great as tight ends are, they do become a little easier to sometimes take away because you can just simply up the ante of the cover guy that you're putting on him. That's got to be a strong guy, and it's got to be a guy that can run. I mean, Bowers is a unique skill set. But that is the school of thought there, is that if Alabama wants to zero in on Bowers, they might be able to take him away. Here's one thing I would also kind of file away here a little bit, and do with this what you will. Georgia has run the Bowers end around twice recently in garbage time. Now, that's a pretty creative play. It's not the kind of thing that you would typically kind of throw out there in garbage time unless you were setting it up as what they call in baseball a purpose pitch. Are they showing this on film to set up something else? I don't know what it would be, whether it's a double reverse or a Philly special, or I don't know. And I'm probably just making stuff up right now. But I have kind of thought about that. There have been a couple of garbage time situations lately where they've run the handoff play, the end around type play to Bowers. And sometimes you wonder if that's on accident or on purpose. Hugh Nash says, I understand yours and others' concern about this game being close because of the past, but honestly, it shouldn't be. This isn't Bama of the past nor the Dogs of the past. I predict 34-17 Dogs. Well, 34-17, I mean, that's within reason of what could happen depending on, kind of how the thing kind of plays out there at the end. Although, admittedly, I do think that Georgia wins the game probably by single digits. As I said on yesterday's show, I just think there's so much talk about a Georgia-Alabama game. There's going to be this there's going to be this financial incentive or just clout incentive to talk up the score more and more and more, because in a situation like this where almost everyone's picking Georgia to win, if you want to stand out from the crowd of picking Georgia to win, now you've got to up the ante. I think Georgia's going to win, and I don't even think it's going to be close. Like, that's just kind of the way that the media world works. Social media, broadcast media, print media, whatever else. That when everyone's saying one thing, you have to say that thing a little louder if you want to get some attention for it. So be careful, and although I am certain that your opinion is your honest, genuine thoughts, be careful with the auctioneer hot take world where it's like, okay, so if everybody's saying Georgia, then if I want my bid to be accepted, if I want my bid to get noticed, I got to raise the ante up. I got Georgia winning by 21 points because that's what it takes to kind of stand out from the rest of the crowd. We don't really have to do that here because we already have a very big audience. But that's just kind of the thing that exists in the media world. That's just kind of the way that media works. Philip Jordan Wells wants the mustard bottle on the desk. So this is one of those things I've kind of battled with. I was kind of told they like the clean desk better. I negotiated Eddie here. Can we show the golden shoe? I'm sorry. Can we show the golden shoe screen? We've kind of gone golden shoe on the wall now. Gator hater on the wall now as a way of kind of keeping the desk a little cleaner. I am going to be building a satellite studio at my house. I will have a golden shoe on display there. Maybe I'll put the mustard bottle on display there in my home studio. We will 99% of the time be broadcasting live here from DawgNation World Headquarters Studios, but we will also be setting up a Southern Command Center, and from there, I may go more props for the home studio, whereas I have to kind of go traditional. They just kind of like the clean look. Eddie obviously has to have his place in addition to the suitable for framing oil painting portrait, but that's kind of what we have to do. All right, it's very late. Let's get ready to get out of here. Bill Kelly says, wife giving up the closet. So, yes, it's actually not my wife. It's really more my kids. So we have, kind of an unfinished basement area. And the kids have just always kind of used it like a dumping ground for toys. Like half of it's my son's and half of it's my daughter's. And like my daughter decorates it like, it basically looks like a unicorn vomited on the one side. And my son's got like all the sports stuff on the other side. And they've just kind of had that as their space. It's not finished. It's not anything like that. It's just kind of their space. Well, other day, Daddy came home and said, listen, I gotta eminent domain some of this basement. I've got to annex some of this basement. They were none too happy about that. But that is what's happened. Santiago D. Arnold says, what about framing the bottle of mustard? That's actually a pretty good idea. Michael Wilson, thanks for tuning in for SEC Country Live. I appreciate that. Joel Moody said I skipped over his fire comment. Joel, I didn't see that. I'm sorry. Can you repost that? Let me see if I can find this. Where is Joel's comment? Ooh, Joel, this is a good idea. He says, what about Eddie riding an elephant on the desk on Monday? That's not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea at all. Eddie taming the elephant, I'd like that. Keith Folds gives you a hashtag beat Bama, hashtag JDNYC. Appreciate that. Keith Finney, thank you for the kind words. Appreciate that. Daniel Aldrich, thank you for the kind words. Appreciate that. Final comments on YouTube and DawgNation.com, and then we are gone. Andrew Hughes says, let's get a Go Dogs. Go Dogs indeed. Can't wait for Saturday. Johnny Lester says, great show, great job, BA. Thanks for the kind words. Johnny's trying to get me in trouble. That's very funny. Tim Harrell says, yeah, listen, cousin Eddie may have been fired from Florida, but Eddie the Blind Squirrel's not going anywhere down here. It's kind of like the line from the movie Office Space with the guy named Michael Bolton. When he says, why should I change my name? He's the one that sucks. Like, why should Eddie have to change his name when Dan Mullen's the one that sucks? Eddie's here forever now. Eddie's not going anywhere. And future generations may wonder, like, why he's named Eddie, but it's going to kind of be like a lot of things in college football. Like, why is a Demon Deacon or a Hoosier a Hoosier? I mean, after 100 years, nobody really knows anymore. But it's just part of history. That's what Eddie is now. All right, let's get a DawgNation.com and we're gone. Brian Jones says he's going to wait for 0-0s to celebrate on Saturday. I like that. Johnny Rick says still surprised by the Bobo firing on the Plains. Yeah, I think Bobo's a good coach, and I'm hopeful that he's on the phone with Kirby Smart this week because I think that his ability to game plan for Alabama is probably pretty good, and he just spent a whole bunch of time getting ready for the Crimson Tide, and that's helpful notes for Georgia. You know, talk about a study aid. Mike Bobo's plans for Alabama could probably come in handy here this week. Extra pair of eyes is always a good thing. I think Bobo's, I don't know if it's a mistake because I don't know that anybody's turning down the chance to be an Auburn offensive coordinator if you got a chance to do that job, but his issue ends up being he hitched his wagon to the wrong coach. Brian Harsin, whether he leaves Auburn after this year or maybe it's after next year, and I'm not even getting into the off-field stuff with Harsin, but just on the field, he doesn't seem like a great fit for the Auburn culture there. The rumors are if he wanted to leave this year for a job, maybe back out west somewhere, they'd waive his buyout to do so. They'd be comfortable watching Harsin leave, even in the midst of a very complicated coaching carousel season that we're currently in. So Bobo was hired there at Auburn to give Harsin, a guy, some SEC credibility who needed it. And ultimately, Harsin just may not be long for that job, and Bobo kind of gets scapegoated for what happened there that year. Brad Otten says he thought Eddie was a gopher. Now, Eddie's the blind squirrel in honor of some of Dan Mullen's previous comments, and Eddie gets the last laugh because he's still here. Intellectual property just reigning supreme while Dan Mullen's falling by the wayside. We desperately have to go. Thanks for being here. RS Andrews Cool Down. Y'all check out RS Andrews online. rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing and electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That is what they will do for you here today. Let me also tell you about this coming up. This is going to be really good stuff. So tomorrow, Friday, and Saturday, the AJC is going to be producing some poster cards. And the one tomorrow is for Jordan Davis. So if you go to the newsstand and you buy a copy of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, so many of you did this when the Braves won the World Series. We're doing kind of the same thing here, getting ready for the SEC championship there as well. So I'm going to show the Jordan Davis one tomorrow, but be ready to buy an AJC copy on the newsstand Thursday, Friday, Saturday for some really special poster cards celebrating some great Georgia players, including Jordan Davis tomorrow. So you better believe we're all over that, doing our part to celebrate that tomorrow. And we'll show you those there tomorrow, but make sure you check that out just for your opportunity to get a great UGA collectible from our friends there at the AJC. That is going to be a really good time. And, of course, as always, thanks for checking in here. Of course, Atlanta mayoral race yesterday. You can get up to date on that, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com, and plenty more on the SEC championship there as well. We will see you tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, 9:45, 1st and 15, 10 a.m. After that, live on video. We'll talk to you then, everybody.